Welcome back to Footnotes Folly, and to Josephus' Antiquities. I am Pemberton. This is Book 14, Part 2. Judea is now a piece on the Roman board, and we watch the governors come and go. Gabinius reorders the country, and chases down the ever-rebelling Aristobulus. Crassus, hungry for gold to fund his war on Parthia, strips the temple of its treasures and marches off to a famous and total destruction. And then the great Roman civil war breaks over the world, Pompey against Julius Caesar. Here the Idumean Antipater shows his genius for being on the right side. He brings timely help to Caesar in Egypt, and Caesar, victorious, makes him effectively the ruler of Judea, with Hyrcanus a figurehead high priest beside him. The house of Antipater is rising. Let us take up the story.
Scaurus now led an expedition against Petrea in Arabia. Because the place was so hard to approach, he set fire to all the surrounding country. When his army began to suffer from hunger, Antipater, acting on Hyrcanus' orders, supplied him from Judea with grain and with everything else he needed. Scaurus then sent Antipater as an ambassador to Aretas, because Antipater had once lived with him. Antipater persuaded Aretas to give Scaurus money so that his country would not be burned, and he himself agreed to stand security for 300 talents. On these terms Scaurus stopped the war, which suited Scaurus' wishes as much as it suited Aretas'. Some time later, Alexander, the son of Aristobulus, made an incursion into Judea. At that same time Gabinius came from Rome into Syria as commander of the Roman forces. He carried out many important actions, and in particular made war on Alexander, since Hyrcanus was not yet strong enough to resist him. Hyrcanus was already trying to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, which Pompey had torn down, but the Romans stationed there prevented him from carrying out that plan. Alexander, however, moved through all the surrounding country and armed many of the Jews. In a short time, he gathered 10,000 armed foot soldiers and 1,500 horsemen. He also fortified Alexandrium, a fortress near Coram, and Machaerus near the mountains of Arabia. Gabinius therefore advanced against him, after first sending Marcus Antonius and other commanders ahead. These men armed the Romans who followed them, and also the Jews subject to them, whose leaders were Pillaged and Malachus. They also took with them the friends who were with Antipater, and went out to meet Alexander, while Gabinius himself followed with his legion. Alexander then withdrew to the neighborhood of Jerusalem. There the two sides attacked each other, and the fight became a regular pitched battle. In it the Romans killed about 3,000 of their enemies, and took about the same number alive. At that time Gabinius came to Alexandrium and invited the men inside it to surrender on agreed terms, promising that their previous offenses would then be forgiven. But a large number of the enemy had set up camp in front of the fortress, and the Romans attacked them. Marcus Antonius fought with great courage, killed many of them, and appeared to win the greatest honor from the action. Gabinius left part of his army there to capture the place, while he himself went into other parts of Judea. Wherever he found cities that had been demolished, he ordered them to be rebuilt. At this time Samaria, Ashdod, Scythopolis, Anthedon, Rephaim, and Dora were rebuilt, as were Marissa, Gaza, and many others besides. Since the men obeyed Gabinius' command, these cities, which had been deserted for a long time, were now inhabited in safety. After Gabinius had done these things in the country, he returned to Alexandrium and pressed the siege harder. Alexander then sent ambassadors to him, asking him to pardon his earlier offenses. He also surrendered the fortresses of Hyrcania and Machaerus, and finally Alexandrium itself. Gabinius demolished these fortresses. But Alexander's mother, who favored the Romans because her husband and her other children were at Rome, came to Gabinius, and he granted everything she asked. After he had settled matters with her, he brought Hyrcanus to Jerusalem, and entrusted the care of the temple to him. He also appointed 5 councils and divided the nation into the same number of parts. These councils governed the people. The first was at Jerusalem, the second at Gadara, the third at Amathus, the fourth at Jericho, and the fifth at Sepphoris in Galilee. In this way the Jews were freed from monarchy and were governed by an aristocracy. Aristobulus escaped from Rome and went to Judea, where he began rebuilding Alexandrium, which had only recently been torn down. Gabinius therefore sent soldiers against him, putting Caecina, Antonius, and Servilius in command. Their orders were to stop Aristobulus from gaining control of the country and to capture him again. Many Jews joined Aristobulus because of the glory he had once had, and also because they welcomed a change in affairs. A certain Pithilus, an officer at Jerusalem, deserted to him with 1,000 men. Yet many of those who came over to Aristobulus had no weapons. When Aristobulus decided to go to Machaerus, he dismissed the unarmed men, since they could be of no use in the actions he was about to undertake. He kept with him 8,000 armed men, and marched on. The Romans attacked them fiercely. The Jews fought bravely, but they were defeated in the battle. Though they fought with energy, they were overpowered by the enemy and put to flight. About 5,000 of them were killed, while the rest scattered and tried to save themselves as best they could. Aristobulus still had more than 1,000 men with him, and with them he fled to Machaerus and fortified the place. Although he had suffered a serious failure, he still had good hopes for his cause. But after resisting the siege for 2 days and receiving many wounds, he was taken prisoner and brought to Gabinius, together with his son Antigonus, who had also escaped with him from Rome. This was the outcome for Aristobulus. He was sent back to Rome and kept there in chains. He had been both king and high priest for 3 years and 6 months, and he was certainly a distinguished man, with a great spirit. The Senate, however, released his children, because Gabinius wrote to them that he had promised their mother this when she surrendered the fortresses to him. So they returned to Judea. Later, when Gabinius was setting out on an expedition against the Parthians, and had already crossed the Euphrates, he changed his plan and decided to return to Egypt in order to restore Ptolemy to his kingdom. This has been told elsewhere. Antipater supplied the army that Gabinius sent against Archelaus with grain, weapons, and money. He also made friends and allies of the Jews who lived beyond Pelusium, and who guarded the passes leading into Egypt. But when Gabinius returned from Egypt, he found Syria in a state of disorder, full of rebellions and disturbances. Alexander, the son of Aristobulus, had seized power by force a second time, and had caused many of the Jews to revolt to him. With a great army he marched through the country, killing every Roman he could find, and then went on to besiege the mountain called Gerizim, where the Romans had retreated. When Gabinius saw Syria in this condition, he said to Antipater, a prudent man, to those who were in rebellion, to see whether he could cure them of their madness and persuade them to return to a wiser course. Antipater went to them and brought many of them back to sound judgment, convincing them to do what they ought to do. But he could not restrain Alexander, who had an army of 30,000 Jews. Alexander met Gabinius in battle, was defeated, and lost 10,000 of his men near Mount Tabor. After this, Gabinius arranged the affairs belonging to the city of Jerusalem in the way Antipater desired. He then marched against the Nabateans and defeated them in battle. He also dismissed Mithridates and Orsanes in a friendly way. They were Parthian deserters who had come to him, although a report spread that they had run away from him. When Gabinius had carried out great and glorious actions in his conduct of the war, he returned to Rome and handed the government over to Crassus. Nicholas of Damascus and Strabo of Cappadocia both described the expeditions of Pompey and Gabinius against the Jews, but neither of them says anything new that is not found in the other. As Crassus was setting out on his expedition against the Parthians, he came into Judea and took away the money in the temple, which Pompey had left untouched. This amounted to 2,000 talents. He also intended to strip the temple of all the gold that belonged to it, which came to 8,000 talents. He took as well a beam made of solid hammered gold, weighing 300 minae, each mina weighing 2.5 pounds. Eleazar, the priest who guarded the sacred treasures, gave him this beam. He did not do it from any wicked purpose, for he was a good and righteous man. He had been entrusted with the care of the temple veils, which were wonderfully beautiful and very costly, and which hung from this beam. When he saw that Crassus was intent on collecting money, and feared for all the temple ornaments, he offered this golden beam as a ransom for everything else. Eleazar did this only after Crassus swore that he would remove nothing else from the temple, but would be satisfied with this one thing, which Eleazar was giving him, and which was worth many tens of thousands of shekels. The golden beam was enclosed inside a hollow wooden beam, and no one knew about it, except Eleazar. Crassus took the beam on the condition that he would touch nothing else belonging to the temple. Then he broke his oath and carried away all the gold that was in the temple. No one should be surprised that our temple contains so much wealth. Jews throughout the inhabited world, together with those who worshipped God, even people in Asia and Europe, had been sending contributions to it from very ancient times. The size of these sums is not without testimony, and their greatness is not something we have invented out of vanity or exaggerated without cause. There are many witnesses to it, especially Strabo of Cappadocia. Mithridates sent to Kos and took the money that Queen Cleopatra had deposited there, and also 800 talents belonging to the Jews. We have no public money except what belongs to God. It is clear that the Jews of Asia had moved this money out of fear of Mithridates. It is not likely that the Jews of Judea, who had a strong city and temple, would have sent their money to Kos. Nor is it likely that the Jews who lived in Alexandria would have done so, since they had no reason to fear Mithridates. Strabo himself gives the same testimony in another place. He says that when Sylla crossed into Greece to fight Mithridates, he sent Lucullus to put down a disturbance raised in Cyrene by our nation, which fills the inhabited world. There were 4 classes of people among those of Cyrene: citizens, husbandmen, strangers, and fourth Jews. These Jews have already entered all cities, and it is hard to find any place in the inhabited world that has not admitted this race of people and is not occupied by them. Egypt and Cyrene, because they have the same governors, and many other nations as well, imitate their way of life, maintain large bodies of Jews in a special manner, prosper more greatly with them, and use the same laws as that nation. Accordingly, the Jews have places assigned to them in Egypt where they live, besides the large part of Alexandria that is specially allotted to this nation. They are also allowed an ethnarch, who governs the nation, administers justice among them, supervises their contracts, and cares for the laws that belong to them, as though he were the ruler of a free republic. Therefore this nation is powerful in Egypt, because the Jews were originally Egyptians, and because the land where they have lived since leaving Egypt is close to Egypt. They also moved into Cyrene because that land bordered the government of Egypt, just as Judea does, or rather had formerly been under the same government. This is what Strabo says. After Crassus had arranged everything as he pleased, he marched into Parthia, where he and his whole army perished, as has been related elsewhere. But Cassius, when he fled from Rome to Syria, took possession of Syria and checked the Parthians, who, because of their victory over Crassus, were making raids into it. When Cassius came back to Tyre, he also went up into Judea. He attacked Tariche, quickly captured it, and carried away about 30,000 Jews as captives. He also killed Pithilus, who had succeeded Aristobulus in his seditious activity. He did this at the persuasion of Antipater, who had great influence with him, and at that time also had high standing among the Idumeans. Antipater had married a woman from that nation, the daughter of one of their prominent men. Her name was Cypros. By her he had 4 sons, Phasael, Herod, who was later made king, Joseph, and Pharoras, and 1 daughter named Salome. Antipater also cultivated friendship and mutual kindness with other rulers, especially with the king of Arabia, to whom he entrusted his children, while he fought against Aristobulus. Cassius then moved his camp and marched to the Euphrates to meet those who were coming to attack him, as others have related. Some time afterward, Caesar, after he had taken Rome, and after Pompey and the Senate had fled beyond the Ionian Sea, released Aristobulus from his chains. He decided to send him into Syria and gave him 2 legions so that, as a powerful man in that country, he might set affairs there in order. But Aristobulus did not get to enjoy the hopes he had from the authorities Caesar had given him. Those of Pompey's party prevented it and killed him by poison, and those of Caesar's party buried him. His body lay embalmed in honey for a long time, until Antony later sent it to Judea, and had him buried in the royal sepulchre. But Scipio, after Pompey sent orders for him to kill Alexander, the son of Aristobulus, because the young man was accused of the offenses he had originally committed against the Romans, cut off his head. So Alexander died at Antioch. Ptolemy, the son of Menneus, who ruled Chalcis under Mount Libanus, took Alexander's brothers into his care. He sent his son Philippian to Ascalon to Aristobulus's wife, and asked her to send back with him her son Antigonus and her daughters. Philippian fell in love with one of the daughters, whose name was Alexandra, and married her. Later, however, his father Ptolemy killed him, married Alexandra himself, and continued to care for her brothers. After Pompey died, and after Caesar had won his victory over him, Antipater, who was managing Jewish affairs, became extremely useful to Caesar during his war in Egypt. He did this by Hyrcanus's order. Mithridates of Pergamus was bringing auxiliary troops, but he could not continue his march through Pelusium and had to stop at Ascalon. Antipater came to him there with 3,000 armed Jews. He had also arranged for the chief men among the Arabians to come to his aid. Because of Antipater, all the Syrians also helped him, since they did not want to seem less eager than others in supporting Caesar. These included Jamblichus the ruler, Ptolemy his son, Ptolemy the son of Sohemus, who lived at Mount Libanus, and almost all the cities. So Mithridates marched out of Syria and came to Pelusium. When the inhabitants refused to admit him, he laid siege to the city. Antipater distinguished himself there. He was the first to tear down part of the wall and open a way for the others to enter. In this way Pelusium was taken. But the Egyptian Jews who lived in the country called Onion would not allow Antipater and Mithridates, with their soldiers, to pass on to Caesar. Antipater persuaded them to join his side because he was of the same people as they were. He especially did this by showing them letters from Hyrcanus the high priest, in which Hyrcanus urged them to maintain friendship with Caesar, and to supply his army with money, and every kind of provision it needed. When they saw that Antipater and the high priest were of the same mind, they did what they were asked. When the Jews around Memphis heard that these Jews had gone over to Caesar, they also invited Mithridates to come to them. He came and received them too into his army. When Mithridates had crossed the whole region called Delta, he came to a pitched battle with the enemy near the place called the Jewish camp. Mithridates commanded the right wing and Antipater the left. When the fighting began, the wing where Mithridates stood gave way and was likely to suffer heavily, unless Antipater had run to him with his own soldiers along the shore after already defeating the enemy opposite him. Antipater rescued Mithridates and put to flight the Egyptians who had been too strong for him. He also took their camp and kept pursuing them. Then he recalled Mithridates, who had been beaten and had withdrawn a long way off. 800 of Mithridates' soldiers had fallen, but only 50 of Antipater's. Mithridates sent Caesar an account of the battle, and openly declared that Antipater was the cause both of the victory and of his own preservation. As a result, Caesar praised Antipater, and used him throughout the rest of that war in the most dangerous undertakings. Antipater was also wounded in one of those engagements. After some time, when Caesar had finished that war and sailed away to Syria, he greatly honored Antipater. He confirmed Hyrcanus in the high priesthood and granted Antipater the privilege of Roman citizenship, together with exemption from taxes everywhere. Many report that Hyrcanus went with Antipater on this expedition and came personally into Egypt. Strabo of Cappadocia bears witness to this when he speaks in the name of Ascanius. After Mithridates invaded Egypt, Hyrcanus the high priest of the Jews was with him. The same Strabo says again in another place, in the name of Hippocrates, that Mithridates at first set out alone, But that Antipater, who had charge of Jewish affairs, was summoned by him to Ascalon, had prepared 3,000 soldiers to go with him, encouraged other governors of the country to accompany him as well, and that Hyrcanus the high priest was also present in this expedition. This is what Strabo says. At this time Antigonus, the son of Aristobulus, came to Caesar and lamented his father's fate. He complained that Aristobulus had been removed by poison through Antipater's means, and that his brother had been beheaded by Scipio. He asked Caesar to pity him, since he had been driven out of the principality that was due to him. He also accused Hyrcanus and Antipater of ruling the nation by force and of doing him injuries. Antipater was present and defended himself against the charges brought against him. He showed that Antigonus and his party were inclined toward change and were seditious men. He also reminded Caesar of the difficult services he had performed while assisting him in his wars, and spoke of matters that Caesar himself had witnessed. He added that Aristobulus had rightly been carried away to Rome as an enemy of the Romans, and as a man who could never be made their friend. As for his brother, Antipater said he had received from Scipio no more than he deserved, since he had been seized while committing robberies, and that the punishment had not been inflicted violently or unjustly by the person who carried it out. When Antipater had made this speech, Caesar appointed Hyrcanus high priest and gave Antipater whatever principality he himself chose, leaving the decision to him. So he made him procurator of Judea. Caesar also gave Hyrcanus permission, at his request, to raise the walls of his own city, since they had been demolished by Pompey. Caesar sent this grant to the consuls at Rome so that it could be engraved in the Capitol. The decree of the Senate was as follows. Lucius Valerius, the son of Lucius the praetor, referred this matter to the Senate on the Ides of December in the Temple of Concord. Present when this decree was written were Lucius Coponius, the son of Lucius, of the Colline tribe, and Papirius, of the Quirine tribe. The matter concerned the proposals made by Alexander, the son of Jason, Numenius, the son of Antiochus, and Alexander, the son of Dositheus, ambassadors of the Jews, good and worthy men, who came to renew the former league of goodwill and friendship with the Romans. They also brought a gold shield, as a sign of confederacy, valued at 50,000 pieces of gold. They asked that letters be given to them, addressed both to the free cities and to the kings, so that their country and their harbors might remain at peace, and so that no one among them might suffer injury. Therefore it pleased the Senate to make a league of friendship and goodwill with them, to grant them whatever they needed, and to accept the shield they brought. This was done in the 9th year of Hyrcanus the high priest and ethnarch, in the month Paemus. Hyrcanus also received honors from the people of Athens, because he had been useful to them on many occasions. When they wrote to him, they sent him the following decree. Under the Prudenia and priesthood of Dionysius, the son of Aesculapius, on the 5th day of the latter part of the month Paemus, this decree of the Athenians was given to their commanders, when Agathocles was archon and Eucles, the son of Menander of Alamusia, was the scribe. In the month Monetian, on the 11th day of the Prudenia, a council of the presidents was held in the theatre. Dorotheus the high priest, together with the fellow presidents, put the matter to the vote of the people. Dionysius, the son of Dionysius, gave the decision. Since Hyrcanus, the son of Alexander, the high priest and ethnarch of the Jews, continues to show goodwill toward our people as a whole and toward each of our citizens individually, and treats them with every kindness, and since, when any Athenians come to him, either as ambassadors or on private business, he receives them graciously and sees that they are safely escorted back, of which we have already had several earlier proofs, it is now decreed, following the report of Theodosius, the son of Theodorus, who reminded the people of this man's virtue and of his purpose to do us every good in his power, that we honor him with a gold crown, the usual reward according to the law, and erect his bronze statue in the temple of Demas and of the Graces. This gift of a crown shall be publicly proclaimed in the theatre during the Dionysian shows, while the new tragedies are being performed, and also during the Panathenian, Eleusinian, and gymnical shows. The commanders shall take care, so long as he continues in friendship and preserves his goodwill toward us, to return every possible honor and favor to the man for his affection and generosity. By this treatment it will be clear how our people kindly receive those who do them good and repay them with a fitting reward, and he may be encouraged, by the honors we have already paid him, to continue in his affection toward us. Ambassadors shall also be chosen from all the Athenians to carry this decree to him, ask him to accept the honors we give him, and urge him always to try to do good to our city. This is enough to say about the honors paid to Hyrcanus by the Romans and the people of Athens.
And we will halt there, with Antipater the real master of Judea by Caesar's favour, and his sons stepping into power beside him. The old royal line is finished as a force, a new Idumean family is taking its place, smoothly, ruthlessly, under Roman patronage. Next time, in part 3, Antipater hands his bold young son Herod the rule of Galilee, and we see the first, alarming sign of the man he will become, in how he deals with the bandits and with the court that dares to put him on trial. And we will read the remarkable file of Roman decrees protecting the Jews. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly. And before the lamp goes out, a small request. If something tonight taught you, or surprised you, or simply delighted you, do leave a comment and tell me what it was. And if there is a work, an author, or a tale you should like me to take up next, set it down there as well. I read every one, and many an episode has begun its life as a viewer's suggestion. Until next time.